The Actros model, the flagship of the commercial Mercedes lineup, appeared in 1996 and immediately it managed to win the title of Truck of the Year in Europe. However, many owners complained about a number of weak points in the car and problems with operation. Of course, the manufacturer refined the car and eliminated the sores. In 2003, the second generation was presented to the public. MP2 as a result of working on bugs and in the form of new cars that were essentially a deep modernization of their predecessor. In 2008, the MP3 model that we are talking about today appeared, but to be completely honest, it was also more of a restyling than a real change of generations, and only in 2012 the Germans presented MP4, a truly new car. Well, now, as always, a few words about indices and designations. So the first thing we see on the cockpit is an index consisting of 4 digits. The first two indicate the total permissible weight of the car. In this case it is 25 tons 44. This is the rounded value of the engine power. In this case it is 435 horsepower force, that is, 44. Then we move on to the VIN code. Well, here, of course, everything is a little more complicated. The first 3 digits speak about the country of origin of the car. Here we see VDB, that is, our car is made in Germany. This is a real German assembly. The next 3 digits speak about the performance of the car. 930, which means either highway or flatbed truck. There are other options. 934, 954, these are truck tractors and other versions depending on the generation. By the way, it is worth noting that the Act of the first and third generation is still produced in different parts of the world, so it is important here that the car was assembled right in Germany. The next 3 numbers, they talk about performance in terms of weight, length, and so on and so forth. 1 indicates to us that the car is left-hand drive, and this is directly the city of production in our case. This is a city up in Germany in our country, probably Act 1, and the most famous for its design is a truck tractor. However, if you pay attention, on-board vehicles are often found, and even more specific versions, for example, like we have a container ship, and even with a low frame, in general, as is customary among the Germans, options and modifications, not counting the special custom version of the Act of Rice, visible, invisible. You can choose anything, length and height of the cabin in several gradations, length of the frame and wheelbase, wheel arrangement of the gearbox, engine version, and of course a rich list of additional equipment. Mercedes Actros is not only one of the most popular trucks on our market, especially in the segment of used cars, but it is also one of the first models that began to appear on our roads as soon as they started buying foreign equipment from us, so you can find on the market both and very tired examples and relatively fresh ones are well groomed. Well, we won't talk about the old people at all. We won't narrow the circle to the MP3 model in this particular version. The cabin of this truck looks, especially from a distance, not much different from the MP2, and if we're honest, from the MP1 too. If we talk about restyling, they can only be distinguished from each other only by people who are very familiar with these cars. There are a lot of different subtleties, but we are talking about something else, and the weak points here, like most commercial Mercedes, primarily relate to the frontal part. Even the slightest chips are already, after a short time it turns here you saffron milk on. Older cars into the air, that is, you can say the classic problems are, of course, rusty lower parts of the doors and wheel arches. Judging by because this cabin literally looks like new, you can assume that it has already been painted at least once. Another interesting feature of the Actros is associated with their design feature. The rear panel has a characteristic stamping to increase the size of the berth, and so dent damage often appears on it and, as a result, repairs and often poor quality, hence additional pockets of corrosion. The Actros cabin is one of the largest in class, especially if we are talking about the giga-space design. The cabin is large, heavy, the roads are bad, as a result, constant failure of the cabin suspension. And it doesn't really matter whether it is pneumatic or classic with springs. I would also like to focus on the mechanism for lifting the cabin. Here it is dual circuit. One of the advantages can be called smooth and uniform lifting of the cabin and, in general, high reliability and reliability even in cold weather. The disadvantages are the need to exert great effort to raise the cabin and frequent failure of the latch. The fireplaces seem to be a primitive mechanism, but it breaks often. In general, anyone who has ever had contact with Mercedes equipment from personal experience will definitely confirm here the issue of attitude towards the car is as important as nowhere else. Not for nothing about the owners of the masses without talking about them, where they take care of the equipment without sparing money and time and do everything as it should, or, on the contrary, exploit it until the latter. Relying on the conviction that this is a Mercedes, it never breaks down, and God forbid you stumble upon a car after a representative of the second group has tested it on himself. The optics here are quite ordinary, nothing special, not original, and naturally expensive. Not the original, cheaper, looks about the same, but shines a little worse, but it pleases a friend that due to the age and popularity of the model, there are problems with the availability of similar parts on the secondary market. That is, of course, it doesn't arise during a showdown. As for electrics and electronics, there really is a lot here, and the earlier the year of manufacture, the more likely problems with it completely. If I may say so, the Germans got rid of childhood illnesses in electrics only with the latest generation of the car, but the difficulty lies in finding a decent service with the right specialists and the necessary equipment. Oh, how difficult it is, and sometimes even an official dealer can repair something that will have to be fixed at a completely different cost. As for the frame, here it is quite strong, reliable, and almost not even susceptible to corrosion. The main problems relate rather to the layout. Many owners they complain about the location of the batteries. The fact is that they are placed here in the rear of the frame and, unlike the classic arrangement, here, firstly, there is more shaking, and secondly, there is more dirt and therefore the batteries fail much faster. The essence of the problem lies in the fact that in this place batteries are exposed to a lot of dirt and dust, and secondly, the level of vibrations is significantly higher here, which obviously does not benefit the battery plates. The suspension here is quite reliable and unpretentious and there are no special problems with it. The main complaints are usually related to the ride height position sensors. The fact that they are not sealed enough and moisture often gets in there. The price of the issue is small, but in principle it's unpleasant. As always, the problem can be treated, for example, by installing a high-quality non-original. But the brakes are a separate topic of conversation here. They are very capricious and require constant attention and care. In cold weather, calipers often jam, valves fail, so it is better to periodically service the mechanisms in advance by buying repair kits for 10 to 15,000 rubles, rather than subsequently going broke on replacing the caliper itself for 100,000. Mercedes engines are the real embodiment of reliability and manufacturability, but here too there are some nuances. Firstly, of course, this design feature, in particular separate cylinder heads, on the one hand is of course reparable and technologically convenient, but on the other hand they periodically leak and all kinds of fogging leaks are far from a rarity. Further, this, of course, is the valve drive mechanism. The fact is that they require systematic, rather frequent adjustments, and this is not just a matter of correct operation of the engine, it is a matter of ensuring that at some point you do not have to change the cylinder block at all, which of course is, to put it mildly, not cheap. As far as injectors here, they are basically ordinary, but here, as lucky as anyone, someone goes on them for 500,000 kilometers, and someone manages to change them already at 50 to 100,000 kilometers. Certain problems were associated with the electric clutch and engine cooling, which was installed on early releases. The coupling turned out to be unreliable over time. The manufacturer even began to recommend replacing it with a simpler viscous coupling. The conversion kit costs about 100,000 rubles in the original. In the non-original, ready-made viscous couplings are supplied with a modified flange that can be inserted instead of the electric one without additional alterations. They ask for 30 to 40,000 rubles for it. The automatic transmission here is of its own production and is quite reliable, but it also has its own characteristics. If you feel that some changes have begun in the operation of the transmission, that it is working somehow incorrectly, many recommend doing the so-called purging. Moreover, it is recommended to do it systematically as a preventive measure, especially before the start of the winter season. How this procedure is done can be easily read in the operating instructions. To summarize, we can say that the Actros is one of the best trucks in its class, but this requires an appropriate attitude towards such a vehicle and the corresponding costs for its maintenance. Good oil, good service, quality spare parts. How can you ask? After all, this is a Mercedes. Where are there so many strange and unexpected technical mistakes? I partly agree with you, but on the other hand, this is a high-tech and premium car, and solving complex technical problems sometimes requires non-standard, non-trivial solutions that you need to be prepared for, including financially. But do you need this? Are you ready to solve this already? As always to you.